Hello, my friends. It's Nick, the ASMR nerd, and today I'd like to talk to you about graphics cards, GPUs, those devices that sit inside your PC and allow you to play modern games at high resolutions and high frame rates. You might have heard, or maybe even encountered yourself, the fact that now is a really bad time to be buying a graphics card. Why? Well, quite simply put, if you are looking for the latest from Nvidia, their RTX 3000 series, or from AMD, their RX 6000 series, there are none. You're pretty much straight out of luck. Or if you can find one available, they are so overpriced. For a point of reference, I just took a look on eBay to see what prices are like, and an RTX 3080, which normally costs $700, that's what it's supposed to cost, I saw many of them selling for over 3 times that price, well over $2,100 US. That's insane. That is nuts. Why though? Why is it that GPUs are so expensive right now? Why is it that they're so hard to come by? And are you going to be able to get your hands on a modern graphics card anytime soon? Those are the questions that I would like to answer here. I've had a lot of people asking me why it is that GPUs are so hard to come by and so expensive right now. But first, you know what's not expensive right now? This sweet t-shirt from this video sponsor, Into the AM. Into the AM creates elevated everyday apparel that both looks awesome and feels awesome as well. One of the coolest things about Into the AM that I've come to appreciate is that all of their designs are exclusively licensed, which means that you're not going to find them anywhere else. Designs like this one right here, this crystallized koi design, which I've been vibing with. It is so colorful. It is really cool. They also sent over a few other t-shirts for me to check out recently, like this kind of spacey, vaporwavy, cyberpunk retro design that I really like. This amazing steampunk clockwork owl, which looks just so rad. And this really cool 9 Worlds tree t-shirt that's got this beautiful, colorful foliage and this super cool serpent coiling around the roots. These designs and more are all available on Into the AM's website, and you can go check them out at the link down in the video description and pinned in the top level comment. You can get 3 of these graphic tees from Into the AM for $60, or 3 of their basic tees for $45. And if you use that link in the video description, you'll get 10% off your entire order, and a portion of your purchase will come back to support the channel, which of course I appreciate very much. At those prices, you could get, I don't know, 100 or more Into the AM shirts for the price of a single RTX 3080 on eBay. When you put it in that perspective, that sounds like a pretty darn good deal. So please go click through, check out that link, see if there's something there that you like. So let's move on now with the meat of the video, talking about the situation with these graphics cards, why it is that we have this ridiculous scenario that is really hampering the PC building space. You know, normally I encourage people to take the plunge and try building their own gaming PCs when it comes time to upgrade or whatever, because I personally find it really fun and really rewarding, and it is easier than it ever has been if you can get the components. But in my 16 years of building PCs, I have never once seen the graphics card market in the state that it's in now. So what's causing this? Well, it's a combination of factors, really, some of which are related to the pandemic, many of which, but not all of them. But with any product, the price and availability are the result of two overarching factors. The first is supply. The second is demand. It's basic market. And I'm going to start off talking about supply, and then we'll talk a bit about the demand situation with these GPUs, because the current situation is affected by both sides of the equation. So these series of graphics cards launched last fall 2020. Nvidia launched their RTX 3000 series with the 3080 and the 3090 in late September, and AMD launched their RX 6000 series in November. And right off the bat, it became very apparent that there were not many of these cards available. I was looking to upgrade my GPU at the time, and I actually stayed up all night long until 6 a.m. Pacific time when these cards went live, the Nvidia's RTX 3000 series. And I tried to buy one of the Founders Edition cards from Nvidia directly. And at 6 a.m. came and went, and I was refreshing the page like mad. The Buy Now button never became available. And at about 10 or 11 minutes or something, I think, after 6 a.m., at one point I refreshed the page, and suddenly it went from, grayed out, like it wasn't available, to just out of stock. It just said out of stock. Nowhere in there did I see a add to cart button or anything like that. It just went straight from not launched to out of stock. And there's a few reasons for why that was the case, but very low initial availability was certainly one of them. People were crying foul and calling it a paper launch, which is to say, it's formally launched on paper, but there's basically no stock available. So that is probably the legacy of the early stages of the pandemic and the economic impact it had in early 2020, when the coronavirus was first kind of breaking out and becoming an emerging issue in China, and then later on a global scale. Chinese manufacturing was temporarily disrupted, and this probably pushed back the earlier stages of development and production for Nvidia's GPUs. And as that went on, that impact was sort of felt like waves through the industry. It just kind of ripples, pushing everything backwards from their intended launch windows and that kind of thing. We saw this effect all throughout the games industry, certainly, although that was not related to manufacturing in China so much as it was to disruption of workplaces and things, later into the year, but same idea. So no surprises there. And as the pandemic went from a localized Chinese problem to a global problem. We also saw the disruption of a lot of shipping. There was a lot of shipping delays through like April 2020. So that kind of set the tone for the launch of these cards. And there is the consideration of the consoles, the new next-gen consoles also launching in fall of 2020, which may have made Nvidia and AMD even feel pressured to get their cards out ahead of those console launches, because those console launches were expected to be, and on some level were, fairly disruptive in terms of the kind of graphics performance you could get at that price point. So, that's speculation, but it did seem like Nvidia was quite intent on launching before those consoles came out. So they targeted September. They had their paper launch, and there were basically no RTX 3080s or 3090s to go around. Now, you might think that since then, the situation would have improved. There's been more time to get manufacturing up and running and build stock. And indeed, that's what Nvidia said was going to happen. But it was not the case. One of the challenges is that neither Nvidia nor AMD manufactures their own graphics chips, right? Like they design the GPUs, the actual chip at the heart of each graphics card. But when it comes to manufacturing these chips in volume, they have to turn to a partner, a foundry that's capable of mass producing these chips. And so for Nvidia, that is Samsung Foundry, this generation anyway. And for AMD, it is TSMC, Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company. And right now, both of those chip makers, their capacity is 100% filled up, as I understand it, as of essentially now, March 2021. And so for AMD and Nvidia, even if they wanted to produce more chips for the market, or they were able to do that somehow, they can't. And that's because these partners work with other companies, right? They're not just beholden to the graphics card manufacturers, but they produce chips for Apple, for example, or for Qualcomm, or any of these companies globally. So, with the production capacity of these chip makers filled up, AMD and Nvidia are in kind of a rough place there. That's sort of the supply side of things. There's also the question of how AMD and Nvidia are prioritizing their silicon. And this is actually something that I picked up on from Hardware Unboxed on YouTube. They do a much better job covering this kind of stuff than I ever could. They're a tech specialized channel, so you should probably go check them out. But what they were suggesting, and other people have suggested as well, is that the reason why certain graphics cards from AMD and Nvidia are harder to find than others right now is due to binning, essentially. So let's back up a couple of steps. So right now, it is especially difficult to find Nvidia's RTX 3080 and their 3060 Ti, or AMD's 6800 XT. And this is probably, at least in part, because those chips, or those GPUs, are based on chips that are actually cut down versions of higher tier models. So take, for example, the RTX 3080. It runs on the GA102 chip. That is the internal designation for the RTX 3080's GPU. And so does the RTX 3090, which is the next step up in NVIDIA's most powerful card that they're offering right now. And so the way this works is NVIDIA tries to manufacture, or rather Samsung Foundries tries to create RTX 3090s. But some proportion of those chips, some of those dies, are going to be a little bit broken. And this is just how chip manufacturing goes. You never get 100% yield for these very complex, incredibly complex chips. But instead of wasting those RTX 3090s that don't quite make the cut, what NVIDIA does is it takes the chips and it selectively disables certain parts of them. Their SMs, which they call their streaming multiprocessors. Basically, they disable certain clusters and parts of these chips. They cut them down that way and turn them into RTX 3080s. This is typical in the tech industry. This is done with CPUs as well. And so 3080s are basically failed 3090s, if you want to look at them that way. And this normally makes sense because it allows them to avoid wasting a bunch of money and a bunch of silicon. But if yields of 3090s, the full fat version of the chip, if yields of those are good and very few of them are actually defective, then it makes sense for NVIDIA to produce 3090s because they sell for a lot more, and the profit margins on those are a lot higher, presumably, than on the 3080s. But specifically, that makes sense if 3090s are flying off the shelves, which they are right now because supply is so limited and demand is so high. We'll get to the demand portion in a second here, but the RTX 3090, despite being priced at an MSRP of $1,500 US and honestly selling for way over that now, a lot of people who want a high-end graphics card, who may have originally been considering something like an RTX 3080, have instead been saying, you know what, screw it, I'm going to take what I can get. And they're buying RTX 3090s. So demand for 3090s, despite them being their sort of top-end Halo product, and being so expensive and having this huge markup on them, they're still selling very, very well. So the theory goes that it behooves NVIDIA to sell every one of those GA102 chips that they possibly can as an RTX 3090, rather than cutting it down to a 3080. In a normal market where there's wide availability of these cards, what would normally happen is those very expensive cards would not see such a demand. And even if NVIDIA could produce, or Samsung Foundry could produce, a perfect GA102 die every time, they would still take some of them and cut them down to 3080s because that segment of the market is going to see much higher demand just because it's a more budget-friendly, segment of the market. Granted, still $700, but relative to a $1,500 3090, it's still better value. But because we're not in that kind of market and demand is so crazy and people are taking whatever they can get, it makes a lot more business sense for NVIDIA to sell RTX 3090s rather than 3080s using that silicon. So that's the theory anyway as to why RTX 3080s specifically are really, really hard to come by. And this applies to RTX 3060 Ti's as well. They are basically cut down GA104 chips, which the full fat version, the fully operational version, gets turned into RTX 3070s. And the same case for the RX 6800 XT from AMD. They are cut down versions of the RX 6900 XT. So for both manufacturers and all those cards, it makes more sense to sell those chips as the pricier version rather than the cheaper version if they can, when demand is so high. So that's just a little piece of the picture about supply on these cards. And pricing is another thing where it seems like a lot of the manufacturers of these cards are saying that component costs are increasing. So back up again a minute. This is kind of complicated. This is a lot of, kind of nerdy technical details on how these cards are manufactured and such. But hey, you're here to fall asleep, so hopefully it's doing its job. So Nvidia and AMD, they design the GPU, the graphics processing unit, that sits inside each graphics card. They are manufactured, those GPUs, by chip makers Samsung Foundry and TSMC. The rest of the graphics card, so that includes the PCB, that's the circuit board, and the cooler and the overall design and that sort of thing, these are manufactured by third-party manufacturers whose names you have certainly heard of, like Asus and MSI, Gigabyte, EVGA, these kinds of companies. So they purchase the GPUs, the actual chips themselves, from Nvidia or AMD, and then they take those GPUs, put them into PCBs, which either follow a reference design from Nvidia and AMD, so kind of the default design, or they might be kind of spruced up a bit, or even completely redesigned. It just depends on the company and the product and what they're trying to offer. And they build those PCBs, they put all the surface mount bits and bobs on the VRM and the VRAM and capacitors and all these things. And they put the cooler on it, and then they sell that to you. So they are the point of sale on these. Well, I mean, there's the distributors and vendors as well, Newegg's of Best Buys and things, but you're essentially, buying the product as branded from these third parties. So all that is to say that companies like Asus, for example, have been crying about the cost of components going up lately. Apparently, a lot of these surface mount components have been increasing in price. A lot of the GDDR chips have been increasing in price. And so, and there's been tariffs as well that have changed, especially in the US. So, Asus, for example, has actually increased formally the MSRP, the suggested retail price of their cards, twice so far in 2021. And it wouldn't surprise me if it happens again. So the official manufacturers' prices have been going up to reflect these component shortages and the increasing prices of the subcomponents that go into the graphics card. Combine that with very limited supply of the GPUs themselves, you have this supply that vastly under, what's the word I'm looking for? They can't match demand. I don't know. That does not meet demand. And so that's, as I understand it, that is the supply side of things. The pandemic-related effects and disruptions to manufacturing, the increasing costs of components due to ongoing component shortages, the very slim time available with Nvidia's chip-making partners, Samsung Foundries and TSMC. They just can't produce chips any faster. And their capacity is split amongst all kinds of different clients globally, all of whom are jockeying for production capacity, probably trying to make deals to get more or whatever, but companies like Apple are willing to pay top dollar for production time from TSMC, for example. So all of that combines to cause this supply shortage. So the other half of the equation is demand, like I said. And demand for GPUs is at an all-time high, largely because gaming at home has become more popular over the last year. Who would have thunk it when we're all stuck inside? People turn to games to find an escape. It makes perfect sense. It's a way to escape the troubles of the times. It's a way to connect, with other people who maybe you can't be with physically. And Steam, their numbers show this to be true. Last year they saw records broken in peaks for all of their statistics, basically. In 2020, Steam sold 21% more games than they did in 2019, and amazingly, they saw 51% more game time spent in games than in 2019. So like a 50% increase in the amount of time that people were playing games on Steam in 2020. So that equates to a massive increase in demand for PC hardware. And anecdotally, I know a lot of people who built or wanted to build new PCs in 2020. Another factor here is that 2020 saw the advent of new tech, not brand new tech, but advanced modern tech like ray tracing, for example, coming to the forefront, finally being available in more games than when it first launched with the RTX 2000 series. And a lot of older graphics cards are really finally being pushed to their limits by some of the blockbuster games of 2020 and now 2021, like, Cyberpunk 2077 with all its ray tracing bells and whistles. Especially the GeForce 10 series, so like your 1060s, 1070s, 1080s, they just can't cut it if you want to run games with all of those ray tracing settings turned on. They don't have hardware ray tracing accelerators. And the lion's share of the PC market is still running on those older cards like 1060s and 1080s. And so a lot of those people running on those Pascal series cards are probably looking to upgrade their GPUs so that they can continue to play those games at the highest settings. And so not only is there an overall increase in the size of the PC gaming market, but also people who are already gaming on PC are looking to upgrade now that it's been a generation or two since they last bought in, and we're seeing this new tech that requires new cards to play effectively. Another factor is that the consoles, the PS5 and Xbox Series X and S, that launched back in the fall, they have also been really limited in supply, especially the PS5, but the Xbox as well. They've both been very hard to come by, so I think a lot of people said, well, screw it, I'll just build a PC, take that plunge, only to get hit with the graphics card shortages. And so all of this combines to create unprecedented demand for the current generation of graphics cards. And Nvidia has acknowledged this. Back in January, their CFO, Chief Financial Officer, Colette Kress, basically said that gaming demand is crazy right now. It's off the charts, and they have not been able to keep up, and they do not expect to be able to keep up anytime soon. And AMD's Lisa Su said more or less the same thing. The current estimates, as of when I'm recording this in very late March 2021, is that we're going to have continuing graphics card shortfalls in terms of production meeting demand through the end of the year, through Q4 2021. That is ultimately the current projection. But wait, it gets worse. I'm sorry to say, but it gets worse. You're probably sitting there saying, Nick, you haven't even mentioned bots or cryptocurrency miners yet. So this is again part of the demand side of supply and demand. So back when I related to you my challenges, my failure to acquire an RTX 3080 on launch day, I mentioned that, it went straight from not available to out of stock. Part of that is probably driven by the, dearth of cards that they had available at launch. But part of it was certainly driven by all those cards that were available getting scooped up by bots. Nvidia admitted that this happened, said they did some stuff to try and fix the situation, but clearly the damage was done. And this has continued to be a problem with many online retailers. What we're seeing is these bots buying up these cards en masse faster than any human could possibly do it. As soon as they come in stock, the bots are buying them up. Then whoever's running those bots is taking those cards and reselling them at insanely inflated prices, these scalper prices that I talked about back at the beginning of the video, and people are buying them for those prices. So these resellers are making a crazy markup on these cards. Some websites have implemented measures to try and cut down on bots buying up cards. Newegg, for example, has a lottery system where you might win the opportunity to purchase one of these cards at a modestly inflated MSRP rather than insane, crazy scalper prices. It's not a perfect solution, which is better than nothing. Other retailers have back order systems in place where you can back order a card and they verify your identity, and then you just wait for the card to become available. That has been me for 6 months with my RTX 3080. So the bots have certainly been one part of the lack of availability and driving up demand on the other end of things. And then cryptocurrency. So I'm not going to get into the details of mining cryptocurrency, what that means, or how it's done, because I'm not really an expert myself, if I'm being completely honest. But the essentials are that these cryptocurrency, these tokens of various kinds, you know, Bitcoin being the one that everyone's heard of, but lately Ethereum has been driving that market. They are mined. The calculations that create and verify these tokens are performed on graphics cards, because it just happens that the algorithms that are used for these things run very well on the massively parallel architecture of GPUs. And so we saw this with the last generation of cards, the RTX 2000 series. And it's the case again here. And, you know, the cryptocurrency market is quite volatile. These things go up and they go down. But certainly the demand from crypto miners for these GPUs is absolutely responsible for a large portion of the outrageous demand and the crazy inflated prices. The prices of RTX 3000 series cards through aftermarket vendors like eBay are well correlated with the price of cryptocurrencies, especially Ethereum. And we saw Ethereum peak back in February, and then it kind of came down a bit, and it was looking like that pressure might be coming off. We might be seeing, some of these resale prices coming back down a little bit. But as of the end of March and the very beginning of April here, those prices are starting to go back up through the roof, and it looks like they're just going up and up and up. Is the cryptocurrency situation going to get better anytime soon? I'm no, analyst. That's not something I can tell you, but right now it's looking pretty grim. And to put things in perspective in terms of, why the value of these cards is being driven by cryptocurrency miners, in 2020, Bitcoin increased by 300%, Ethereum increased by over 450%, I think. This is very profitable. It's really profitable for these miners to buy these cards, even at crazy inflated prices, and just let them mine away for, eternity. They still break even. It's still worthwhile. So, as a bit of a side note, related, but Nvidia actually tried to combat this, kind of. You might have heard that with their RTX 3000s or 3060 launch, they claimed that the GeForce cards, their gaming branded cards, would have their hash rate locked, which basically meant that cryptocurrency miners could not use them to effectively mine cryptocurrencies. And Nvidia claimed this was some kind of complex handshake between the hardware and the VBIOS and the driver. Which, okay, maybe if that works and can't be bypassed, then that's something, I suppose. But even if it did work, the fact of the matter is, as I was explaining on the supply end of things, we are supply constrained on these cards right now. There's only so much manufacturing capacity at Samsung Foundry. So what Nvidia basically said was that the GeForce cards would be have their hash rate locked. For miners, they would be offering mining specific cards that were basically stripped down versions of these GPUs, no display outputs or anything like that. They would be cheaper than the GeForce equivalents, but to be more economical for miners, and then the miners wouldn't be competing with the gamers for the GeForce cards. But of course, that's absolute hogwash, because like we were just saying, they are supply limited. those GPUs, that silicon, if it's an RTX 3060, it's an RTX 3060, and they have to, if every RTX 3060 GPU that is produced that gets turned into one of these crypto-specific cards is a GPU that's not getting turned into a GeForce card. So it's kind of a zero-sum game, right? Linus Tech Tips had a big video on this back when they first announced this, Nvidia first announced this, about how ultimately this is just marketing. It's just Nvidia trying to play both sides of the market, the gaming and the crypto sides, and trying to appease both sides with marketing spin. But in terms of actual availability for these cards, it makes zero difference. Now, they claim otherwise. They say that the ones going to the miners couldn't be turned into GeForce GPUs for some reason, but they don't really explain why or how. That's not really how it works, to the best of my understanding. So, I guess if they made the argument that, well, if there were defective 3060 dies, they bin them into something less powerful for the crypto miners, but that's not what they're doing. So, and all of that is assuming that the hash rate locks on these RTX 3060s couldn't be easily bypassed, which, as it turns out, they absolutely can be. They can be spoofed in multiple ways, and there are, functioning mining rigs stuffed full of RTX 3060s to, demonstrating that that Nvidia's hash rate cap doesn't work. More to the point, Nvidia actually managed to mess it up themselves within a couple weeks of launching the RTX 3060 by accidentally releasing a version of the driver, the graphics driver, that had this cap removed. It went out through the Windows Insider program, was quickly repealed, but once it's out in the wild, the cat's out of the bag. It's too late. That driver is out there. Not only that, but it demonstrated that the hash rate cap is exclusively removable with software alone, with drivers alone. It doesn't require modifying the hardware or anything, the BIOS, anything. It can be removed in software. So basically, all this is to say that Nvidia's push to say, look at our GeForce cards, the miners can't use them, fundamentally a flawed concept, and the execution they screwed up as well. So the crypto market is going to continue to be a major factor in determining the lack of availability of current gen GPUs for a long time to come, basically. Now, as I said, there is a lot of market volatility in cryptocurrencies, and I am no analyst. I can't see into the future or predict what's going to happen. So maybe we see a big crypto crash and suddenly we start seeing more GPU availability. But I doubt it. I doubt that's going to be the case anytime soon. And of course, all of this has a knock-on effect on the used GPU market as well. So, you might be saying, well, I don't need the latest and greatest. I can go buy an RTX 2000 series or RX 5000 or even an older Pascal card or something. But you will find that the prices on those are also crazy inflated right now, to the point that people are selling them for close to what they bought them for years ago. This is after years of use, right? And so the used market isn't really a solution right now either. So where does this leave us? What is the way forward for someone who wants to buy a graphics card and build a PC right now? As I was saying, these shortages are expected to continue through Q4 2021. And I wish I had a better answer for you guys. I wish I had a solution. I wish I had a positive outlook here. But the way I see it, you have two choices right now. Three choices, really. The first is that you can just hang tight. Be patient. Maybe get your hands on a console instead, as much as that hurts me to say, as a PC gamer primarily. You know, an Xbox Series X is looking like a pretty darn good investment these days, and they do seem generally more available than any of these GPUs. So if you can be patient, you can back order cards through many retailers, or you can play the lottery on somewhere like Newegg, and eventually, probably months down the line, you'll probably be able to get your hands on a card that you're looking for. Another option is to use stock alert bots. There are a number of Discord bots, there's Twitch channels and YouTube channels that are dedicated to alerting people as soon as there's a restock on these cards. And there have been, you know, a slow trickle of these graphics cards coming in over time to most major retailers, but it is a very slow trickle. But if you can get in there right off the bat, as soon as there's a restock alert, you might be able to get one of these graphics cards. I have a friend who was actually able to do just that with an RTX 3080, and he just basically got one right away. So it's not impossible. The third option, the one I do not recommend, is buying cards at scalper prices. Quite frankly, I know there's people with a lot of money and they just don't care. They just want to get the latest and greatest and they don't care what it costs them. But it is driving up the prices in this ridiculous aftermarket situation. And I just hate seeing these scalpers getting away with charging what they do on these cards, especially because they are probably the ones that are using the bots to scoop up the cards and deny, you know, the everyman the chance to purchase them in the first place. So, you know, if you spend scalper money on eBay to buy these cards, like, I'm not going to say you're a bad person. You know, that's the market. That's the situation we're in. Everybody's got to make their own choices on these things. But I do urge you to really consider the value of what you're spending the money on, and whether it's really worth it to spend more than 3 times the price that these things are worth, or, you know, the manufacturer's retail price on one of these cards. I would say it's not. That's why I've been waiting for months and months on this RTX 3080. I would advocate patience, but again, everyone's got to make their own choices about you know, their purchasing and their budget and what makes the most sense for them. So that, ladies and gentlemen, was my whirlwind tour of the current situation of the GPU market, why supply is so limited, why demand is so high, what we can expect over the next while, and why you are having such a darn hard time getting your hands on one of these current gen GPUs. It was a little disorganized. It was a little bit rambly. It was maybe not the most clear, but I do hope that maybe you learned a thing or two, and maybe it gives you some ideas about what your plans are if you are looking to buy one of these cards, or maybe pick up a console over the next little while. So, or if not any of that, I hope it at least helps you fall asleep or get some tingles. I would love to hear from you. If you've managed to get your hand on one of these unicorn cards, I'd love to hear from you down in the comments. How did you do it? What did you pay for it? Do you have any thoughts about supply, demand, something that I missed? There's probably a lot. This wasn't comprehensive. This is just my layman's understanding as someone who's, you know, interested in the industry, an enthusiast, a PC enthusiast, but not an industry insider or expert or anything like that. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed it, and I'd love to hear from you, like I said, down in the comments as well. Special thanks to the sponsor for today's video, Into the AM. Like I said, if you like the look of this shirt or some of the others I showed earlier, click through that link down in the video description or pinned in the top level comment to check out their amazing selection of exclusive graphic tees. Get 10% off using that link, and you support the channel in the process, which means a lot to me as well. So thank you if you decide to do that. And thank you all for watching. I really hope you found this informative, and I hope you found it relaxing. And I look forward to having you back here next time. Bye for now.